She typed 3 words. "I'm outside, baby." 20 minutes later, she was gone. By sunrise, neighbors complained of a foul stench, rotting flesh, something dragging through the woods. Within hours, officers found a limp phone, shards of a shattered screen, and blood trails leading into the trees. 3 days later, what they discovered turned every horror you've imagined into an ugly truth. Fragments of her body strewn across 2 counties in Texas. What unfolded wasn't mere murder. It was an operation, a trade, a betrayal. Have you ever handed your trust to someone you barely knew? Flown halfway across the world, slept in a city you couldn't pronounce without telling a soul where you were staying. Somewhere in that silence lies the key. Subscribe now, because in the next chapter, we'll uncover how loneliness becomes weapon, how borders vanish under the weight of crime, and how one disappearance unravels an entire network. You won't believe what comes next. Rosa Velasco was a 55-year-old former elementary school teacher from Cebu City, Philippines. Widowed 8 years earlier after her husband's battle with cancer, she had dedicated herself to raising 3 children, 2 sons, Luis, 32, and Diego, 28, and a daughter, Par, 30. Each child had since established their own independent lives. Rosa's daily existence was marked by simplicity and routine. She found solace in attending church services on Sundays, and cherished the moments spent in video calls with her grandchildren. Evenings were often spent in solitude, reflecting on the years gone by. Despite the challenges life had presented, Rosa remained resilient and hopeful, seeking connection and companionship in a world that had become increasingly digital and distant. Rosa's apartment was a quiet echo of the past. The faint smell lingered, a scent her husband had adored. His chair, still sitting by the window, remained untouched, as if waiting for him to return. Every evening the space seemed to close in on her, the silence growing louder, more oppressive. With each passing year, her sister Beatrice often said it without meaning to be cruel. She stopped laughing like she used to. It was true. The woman who had once been the life of the family, always ready with a joke or a smile, had become a shadow of herself. Rosa's laughter, once bright and full of life, had faded into a quiet hum. In her diary, a page was found scrolled with words that painted the most intimate truth of all. "I don't want to be invisible anymore." The emptiness stretched beyond her apartment. The sound of her neighbors' laughter, the clinking of dinner plates, always seemed to filter through the thin walls, a reminder of the life she no longer had. The cold side of the bed, always left untouched, felt like a permanent scar. She had once dreamed of being surrounded by love. But now all that remained were group chats filled with photos of couples, vacations, and family reunions. Reminders of what she'd lost and what she could never be part of anymore. It was in that silence, that vast emptiness, that the message arrived, a simple ping on her phone. "I'm outside, baby." A message that would change everything. In March 2022, Rosa joined FilipinoHearts.com, a dating platform where many sought companionship and connection. There, she encountered a profile that seemed to promise everything she longed for. The man behind the profile went by the name Tommy Bradford. At 42, he presented himself as a construction foreman based in Houston, Texas. His photos depicted a rugged yet approachable man, handsome, casually dressed with an American flag backdrop and work boots that suggested a hard-working, grounded individual. His bio read, "Looking for a real woman who values family and isn't afraid of commitment." To Rosa, it was the kind of sincerity she had been yearning for. His words resonated with her desire for connection, and she felt an immediate pull They began exchanging messages, and soon their conversations moved to video calls. Tommy's charm was undeniable. His compliments were flattering, his attentiveness comforting. He spoke of his life in Houston, his longing for a partner who shared his values, and his dreams of building a future together. Rosa, seeking companionship and perhaps a new chapter in her life, found herself drawn to him. She began to share more about her life, her hopes, and her loneliness. Tommy listened, empathized, and offered the kind of attention she hadn't felt in years. But beneath the surface, warning signs began to emerge. Tommy's requests became more frequent and personal. He asked for pictures, for details about her daily life, and subtly encouraged her to share more intimate aspects of herself. Rosa, eager to please, and perhaps blinded by her desire for connection, complied. Then came the invitation. Tommy suggested she visit him in Houston. He promised to take care of everything. Travel arrangements, accommodations, and a warm welcome. He painted a picture of a romantic reunion, a new beginning. Rosa hesitated. Her children were concerned. Her sister Beatrice warned her to be cautious, but Tommy's reassurances were convincing. He spoke of his loneliness, his desire to build a life with her, and his commitment to making her feel valued. And so, with a mixture of hope and apprehension, Rosa made the decision to go. She booked her flight, packed her bags, and prepared to meet the man who had promised her a future. But as she boarded the plane, a nagging feeling lingered. Was she making a mistake? Had she overlooked the subtle signs, or was this the beginning of the rest of her life? The answers would come soon. Enough. In the beginning, it was innocent enough. Week 1, Tommy's compliments were simple, harmless. How was your day? He'd ask. His messages often arriving at the end of her evening when she felt most alone. He was attentive, but there was something about his consistency that was almost too perfect. Always right when she needed it. By week 3, Tommy's presence grew more noticeable. He started sending voice messages, his voice warm but hurried, the sounds of construction in the background, the clink of tools, the hum of machinery. It all felt real. Grounding, as if he were genuinely on a job site. Sometimes his voice would break up as if he were moving around. But he always made time to check in. I'm just finishing up, he'd say. But I wanted to hear about your day. By week 6, the messages escalated. Tommy began video calling her, always from what appeared to be a dimly lit room. Just got home from the site, he'd explain each time, his tired eyes and rumpled appearance matching his story. It felt intimate, like she was the only one he could turn to after a long, exhausting day. But the calls were always dark, the shadows hiding any real details of his surroundings. Then came month 3. The tone of his messages changed deeper, more vulnerable. You're the only woman who understands me, Rosa, he said one night after a lengthy call. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I've never met anyone like you. Rosa, craving connection, felt herself drawn in. Tommy's words felt like a lifeline, like the affection she had been waiting for. But even as she responded, a small part of her wondered, was this the real Tommy, or was this the Tommy he wanted her to believe in? There were little things. Red flags, that Rosa either missed or chose to ignore. Tommy never gave her an exact address. I live north of Houston. Near the woodlands, he'd say casually, as if it didn't matter. For weeks, he kept the location vague, leaving Rosa with only a hazy picture of where he actually lived. Then there were the video calls. Always during the evening. Always dark. No daylight ever filtered through his window. No sun-kissed moments, no clear view of his surroundings. It was always the same dim room. And each time Tommy would say something like, "I just got home from the site. I'm too tired to set up the lights properly." As their conversations deepened, so did his questions specifically about her finances. "I want to make sure you're taken care of," Tommy had said as if it was a casual thought. He asked about her job, her savings, even her retirement plan. It felt off, but Rosa, wanting to believe in him, justified it as concern. Then came the seeds of doubt, carefully planted. If you really loved someone, wouldn't you surprise them? Wouldn't you be spontaneous? Tommy would ask, as if testing her devotion. He was subtly pushing her boundaries, feeding the idea that love required more than just trust. It demanded action, impulsiveness. One evening, he said something that stuck with her. "Real love doesn't wait for permission. It just shows up." The words felt romantic, like something out of a movie. But Rosa couldn't shake the feeling that he was pushing her towards something she wasn't ready for. Her children, concerned but powerless, tried to intervene. Polar, her daughter, looked at her with a worried expression. "Mama, you've never even seen this man in clear light. How can you trust him?" Rosa's voice trembled, but she stood her ground. "You don't understand. He makes me feel young again. He listens to me. He cares." Luis, always the skeptic, asked the questions Rosa hadn't thought to. "What's his last name? Where does he work? Let me check him out. I can find out if he's real." Rosa, her patience wearing thin, shot back. "You're trying to control me like children. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions." But something in her words rang hollow, even to herself. Then, as if to prove his devotion, Tommy sent a care package. It arrived one afternoon, a box of Texas-shaped chocolates, a Houston Astros cap, and a few photos of what he claimed was his apartment. Rosa smiled at the gesture, touched by his thoughtfulness. But a small part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The photos looked staged. They didn't feel personal. The furniture looked too generic, too perfect. Later, when Rosa tried to find similar images online, she discovered the truth. The photos weren't of Tommy's apartment at all. They were stolen from Airbnb listings. The pieces were falling into place, but by then it might have been too late. The decision was made. The flight was booked. On the 15th of September, 2023, Rose boarded her Philippine Airlines flight from Cebu to Los Angeles. A mix of excitement and dread churning in her stomach. She told her family she was going to visit a friend in California. A simple enough story, safe, familiar. But there was more to it. A truth that she kept hidden. The lie she told. "I have a hotel booked in Los Angeles. Just a short stay before heading back home." The truth. The address she had saved in her phone wasn't for a hotel at all. It was Tommy's address, the vague location he had shared with her weeks ago. It was the place she was now flying toward. The place where everything she had imagined her future could be was about to collide with something darker. As the plane lifted off, Rosa's mind raced. The excitement was palpable. She was on her way to meet the man who had promised her love, security, a new chapter in her life. She looked out the window, watching the city of Cebu shrink beneath her. And for a brief moment, everything felt right. She could picture it. Tommy waiting for her in Houston. The warm embrace, the promises fulfilled. But beneath that excitement, a layer of dread slowly settled in her chest. The warnings her family had given her echoed in her mind. Polar's concerned face, Louisa's cautious words, they were all still fresh. But Rosa pushed them aside. She didn't want to be that woman anymore. The one who had to answer to everyone. She was an adult. She was choosing her path. When the plane touched down at LAX, the reality of the situation hit her hard. She was so close now, only a few hours away from the man she had invested so much emotion into. But the nagging feeling, doubt, fear lingered. She quickly tried to silence it. Rosa kept her phone close, checking Tommy's messages. He was excited, too. Counting down the minutes until she arrived. He had sent her a map, a step-by-step guide on how to get to him. Once she landed. She wasn't staying in a hotel after all, but Tommy assured her she'd be comfortable. She'd be safe. As the taxi driver made his way to the spot Tommy had mentioned, Rosa stared out the window, the city lights blurring as she drifted in and out of thoughts. She had made it this far. She had to trust her instincts now. She wasn't prepared for what lay ahead. But at that moment, there was no turning back. The hum of the aircraft was a constant comforting presence. As Rosa sat in her seat, clutching her phone, each vibration of the device sent a ripple of anticipation through her. Tommy's messages were there, waiting. Can't wait to see you. It's going to be amazing. I promise. They were filled with excitement, but beneath them, something deeper churned in her gut. A mix of hope and unease. Rosa glanced down at her carry-on. Inside, she had packed new clothes she hoped would fit in with his life, soft fabrics, and fresh shoes she'd never worn before. There was a bottle of her favorite perfume, one she thought he might like, and nestled in the corner of the bag, a gift, something from home, a hand-woven Filipino blanket. The vibrant threads were a piece of her, a part of the life she was leaving behind. She hadn't told Tommy about it yet, but she imagined it would make a good conversation starter. Her thoughts were interrupted by the loudspeaker announcement as the aircraft began its descent. LAX was near. Rosa's heart skipped as the plane touched down. She had a layover before her final flight to Houston. As soon as she had a moment, she sent a few photos to Beatrice. She stood in front of a window, her smile wide and genuine, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I'm here. Everything's good so far, Ma. I'll send you more later. Beatrice replied. Almost immediately, her concern palpable even in text. Take care of yourself, Mama. Be careful. Rosa set her phone down, her fingers trembling slightly as she tried to mask the unease. The feeling she couldn't shake only seemed to intensify in the busy LAX terminal. A sea of people, noise, and hurried footsteps. The distance between her and her family felt vast now, more real than it ever had been before. The final leg of her journey was a Southwest flight to Houston Hobby Airport. As she boarded the plane, Rosa's excitement began to mingle with a growing sense of dread. The cabin was cozy, the air dry. Her mind kept replaying Tommy's words, his promises, his care. She glanced out the window at the fading sunset, the golden hues reflected in the glass. But beneath it all, the blanket in her bag, the phone that buzzed with his words, and the journey ahead, all seemed so surreal. In a matter of hours, she would meet him. The truth, however, was still hidden. The plane touched down at Houston Hobby Airport at 2:30 p.m. on the 16th of September, 2023. The moment the aircraft's wheels made contact with the tarmac, Rosa felt a jolt of excitement mixed with a lingering twinge of apprehension. As she made her way through the terminal, the loud, bustling environment of Houston swallowed her up. The last official record of her entry into Texas was stamped onto her passport, a simple mark that signified the beginning of her meeting with Tommy. She texted him immediately from baggage claim. "I'm here. Where are you?" His reply came quickly. "Stay there, baby. Sending someone to pick you up. I'm stuck at the work site. Pipe burst emergency." Rosa smiled as she read the message. He was thoughtful, always looking out for her. She texted Beatrice, her fingers tapping out a message with a mix of excitement and pride. "He's sending a driver. He's so thoughtful." Beatrix's reply came moments later, but it was unread for a while. "Wait for him inside the airport." Rosa didn't see the warning in her sister's words. To her, everything felt fine. Tommy was busy, but he was making sure she was taken care of. She figured it would be fine to wait outside for the driver to arrive. The terminal buzzed with the voices of arriving passengers, the soft clink of luggage wheels on the smooth floor, and the distant murmur of overhead announcements. Everything felt normal, even in this strange place so far from home. But Beatrix's words, sitting unanswered in her phone, would be the last cautionary message Rosa would ignore. The airport's surveillance cameras captured everything. Rosa stepped out into the hot Texas air, her eyes scanning the busy parking lot. She hesitated for a moment, pausing to look around, checking her phone for any updates from Tommy. The footage showed her face anxious yet hopeful as she stood alone in the crowd. Then a white cargo van appeared pulling up to the curb. The vehicle had no windows in the back, just an unmarked, nondescript design that blended easily into the background. The driver, a man wearing a baseball cap, remained in the van. He didn't get out to help with her luggage, which was unusual for a driver sent by someone. He simply sat behind the wheel, his face hidden in the shadow of the cap. Rosa hesitated. The cameras clearly captured her checking her phone once more, eyes flicking to the screen as she read Tommy's messages. The final reassurance. "Stay there. I'll send someone to pick you up. It's just a quick fix on the site. Everything's fine." She paused again, but only for a brief moment. Then with a final glance around the lot, she opened the van door and climbed inside. That was the last time Rosa Velasco was seen alive on camera. In that moment, getting into that van, Rosa made a choice based on trust. A trust that had been carefully, methodically built over 6 months, and it would cost her everything. The silence was thick, suffocating, and as each hour passed, it only deepened. September 16th. 4 p.m. Rosa sent her last text to Beatrice. "In the car, signal bad. We'll call soon." The heart emoji, a tiny gesture of reassurance, would be the final sign of life from her, but no call came. As the hours passed, the family's unease began to swell into panic. Polar called her mother's phone several times, each ring ending in the familiar buzz of voicemail. "Maybe she's just busy," Luis reasoned, trying to reassure himself more than anyone else. But Beatrice knew. Rosa always answers. Always. The conviction in her voice was sharp, cutting through the denial. The next day, when Rosa's phone remained silent, the family's dread deepened. Luis took the first step into action. He contacted the Philippine consulate in Houston, hoping for some help. But they needed more information. Where was she staying? Who was she meeting? The question was simple, but the answer was anything but. Rosa had shared nothing concrete. They had no address, no last name, no real details to help track Tommy down. Then came the discovery that sent a chill through the entire family. Tommy's profile had been deleted. His number was disconnected. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. Desperation led Diego to Houston, where he filed a missing person report with the Houston Police Department. Officer Franklin, the detective assigned to the case, asked a series of basic questions that the family couldn't answer. Where was she going? To meet someone. Where was she staying? We thought, with him. What's his full name? Tommy Bradford, we think. The questions were simple, but they left a bitter taste in the air. How had they allowed so much to slip through the cracks? The investigation quickly became a bureaucratic nightmare. HPD, burdened by limited resources, classified Rosa as an adult who had chosen to travel. Without evidence of foul play, they couldn't prioritize her case. Immigration confirmed that Rosa had entered the U.S., but never left. There were no hotel bookings under her name, no car rentals, no credit card activity after a simple purchase at an airport Starbucks. It was as though she had disappeared from the system entirely. Meanwhile, Beatrix nightly ritual became a haunting, staring at Rosa's last message. Every night, she would read it again, hoping it would change, hoping it would mean something different. But it never did. Parr was consumed by guilt. I should have stopped her. I should have physically stopped her. She couldn't shake the feeling that if she had just acted differently, maybe Rosa would still be safe. Louise, on the other hand, was consumed by anger. Some bastard out there knows where she is. The frustration of being powerless was gnawing at him, and he couldn't let it go. But what the family didn't know, what no one knew, was that far from their desperate search, the horrifying reality of Rosa's fate was already sealed. In a warehouse in northeast Houston, in the humble area, Rosa's phone lay smashed into pieces, discarded in a dumpster. Her luggage had been burned, the remnants of her life reduced to ashes. Her passport was removed and would soon be sold off. A key to her identity slipping into the hands of those who knew no boundaries. And Rosa herself. She was already gone. The call came in as an anonymous 911 tip. The voice, muffled and hurried. There's something in the storage units off Beltway 8, Unit 247. You need to check it. The line disconnected before the operator could respond. Harris County Sheriff's deputies arrived at Store Safe Self Storage. The air thick with anticipation and unease. Unit 247 had been rented under a fake name, paid for in cash. The deputies cut through the lock with bolt cutters, and as the door creaked open, the stench hit them. It wasn't just the smell of decay. It was something worse, something no one was prepared for. Inside, black trash bags lay scattered across the floor. As the bags were opened, the deputies recoiled, but the horror they saw was undeniable. Partial remains in advanced stages of decomposition, but identifiable as a human female. The medical examiner's initial assessment was chilling. Multiple victims possible. Then, a detail that would break the case wide open. Wrapped around the remains was a handwoven Filipino blanket stained with blood, the same one Rosa had packed in her carry-on. Following the tip-off, the police moved to an abandoned house in Channelview, just 15 miles away. In the basement, the truth was even darker. More remains were discovered, scattered across the cold floor. Surgical tools were found nearby. Glints of metal in the shadows along with ice chests labeled with cryptic medical terms. A laptop sat open. An encrypted messaging app left running as though the monster behind it all had just stepped away. Forensics worked quickly, uncovering a disturbing pattern. DNA from multiple individuals was found among the remains. At least 3 different women's remains were identified. The evidence pointed to something even more sinister: organ harvesting. Rosa Velasco's body was identified through dental records on September 25. Diego received the call in the middle of the night at a Houston hotel. The words fell heavy on him, and with trembling hands, he dialed his siblings for the hardest conversation of their lives. The sound of Beatrix's scream carried through the phone. Described later as a sound that carried 6,000 miles of pain. The cause of death was clear: strangulation. But the details that followed were far worse. Evidence of organ removal: her kidney and liver had been taken. The estimated time of death was sobering: 24 to 48 hours after her arrival in Houston. The implication was chilling. Rosa had been killed almost immediately after getting into that van. Rosa had flown 8,500 m for love. She survived 22 hours in the air, navigated 2 layovers, passed through customs and immigration, and less than 2 days after landing, she was murdered for her organs. As the scope of the case expanded, the need for a dedicated task force became clear. Houston PD homicide detective Angela Foster was assigned as the lead investigator. She was joined by Agent Raymond Cho from the FBI's Human Trafficking Unit, specialists from Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, an Interpol liaison, and representatives from the Philippine National Bureau of Investigation, NBI. Together, they formed a multidisciplinary team tasked with uncovering the full extent of the crime network behind Rosa Velasco's brutal murder. The investigation began by following the trail left behind in the digital world. FilipinoHearts.com. The dating app Rosa had used, quickly cooperated when the task force presented a warrant. The account for Tommy Bradford was traced to IP addresses across Texas. Although a VPN had been used to obscure his tracks, mistakes were made. One critical login came from the Houston Public Library, where surveillance footage was pulled. The grainy video showed a man wearing a baseball cap, but it was enough to start connecting the dots. Tommy had used a burner phone to communicate with Rosa, but the task force was able to track its history through ping towers. Regular pings were traced to the warehouse district in Humboldt, Texas, near the storage units where Rosa's remains were found. When they cross-referenced the phone's location history with the units' rental time frame, a match was discovered. The pieces were beginning to fit together. Next, they turned their attention to the van that had picked Rosa up at the airport. Enhanced surveillance footage revealed a partially visible license plate. After further investigation, it was discovered that the van was registered to a shell company, GF Coast Medical Transport LLC. The listed address was an empty office building, but financial records revealed cash deposits made every month. The amounts growing suspiciously as the investigation progressed. The financial trail proved to be a pivotal clue. The company had a bank account that showed consistent cash deposits, often coinciding with the dates of women going missing across the Southwest. The amounts ranged from $35,000 to $50,000 per deposit. When the investigators looked deeper, they realized that these were not ordinary payments. These were finder's fees linked to a black market organ trafficking operation. A chart was created to illustrate the illicit prices on the black market. Kidney Madam Ephis. Liver Myomishum Ephis Harta Hat Epis. The evidence was damning the operation. Was not just about one woman. This was a widespread calculated network of human trafficking and organ harvesting. The deeper the task force dug, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't the work of a single killer, it was the operation of an organized crime syndicate. Investigators discovered that the recruiters behind this network targeted lonely women online, often using dating apps like FilipinoHearts.com. These women were lured to Texas, which had become a central hub for the operation due to its proximity to international airports and the U.S. border. The women, often in vulnerable positions, were brought to Texas, where their organs would be harvested and sold to desperate patients through dark web medical brokers. The bodies were disposed of at various locations, scattered across the state to avoid detection. As the investigation progressed, the task force was able to link Rosa's case to other disappearances. Yuki Tanaka, 48, a Japanese widow who had gone missing from Seattle, was found in Houston. Priya Chandran, 52, an Indian divorce missing from Toronto, was also discovered in Houston. The pattern was becoming undeniable. All of the women were between the ages of 45 and 60. They all met their killers through online dating platforms, and they all traveled under the guise of surprising their partners. The breakthrough came when investigators found a spreadsheet on a seized laptop. The file contained a list of potential targets with columns rating each woman based on age, health status, loneliness score, gullibility, family interference level. Rosa's name appeared on the list with a chilling set of ratings: high gullibility, low family interference, excellent health markers, blood type O negative, premium. OSA hadn't been chosen randomly. She had been selected like merchandise, evaluated for her value in the black market. The horror was now undeniable. She had been specifically targeted for her physical attributes and vulnerability. A critical mistake from the criminals would provide the breakthrough. The warehouse where the remains had been kept had a ring doorbell camera which caught footage of the same van arriving with women at different times. In one clip, the driver was clearly visible. A white male in his 30s with a tattoo on his neck. Facial recognition software quickly hit a match. Tyler Boone, 34, a man with a prior arrest for identity theft. This was the first real lead on the men behind the operation. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the investigation was moving closer to unraveling the full extent of the network. As the first light of dawn broke over Houston, law enforcement was already in motion. The task force had prepared for this day for weeks, and now the arrests were imminent. It would be the beginning of the end for the deadly network that had claimed Rosa Velasco and so many others. Tyler Boone was arrested in bed, his eyes heavy with sleep as officers swarmed into his apartment. His girlfriend, who was present but unaware of his activities, watched in shock as the arrest unfolded. Boone didn't resist. He knew it was over. As investigators searched the apartment, they seized a trove of damning evidence. Multiple phones, a laptop, fake IDs, and women's jewelry belongings taken from his victims. The chilling reality of the operation was staring them in the face. The next location was the house in Channelview, where the horrific organ harvesting had taken place. Inside, they found Victor Ruiz, a 41-year-old former medical technician who was arrested without incident. In the basement, investigators uncovered an improvised surgical setup, sterile tools, coolers packed with dry ice, and a log book that catalogued the dates of procedures, blood types, and organ codes. It was a medical operation, but one rooted in violence and exploitation. Ruiz, standing in front of the authorities, showed no remorse. The third raid was the most surprising of all. Dr. Kenneth Okafor, 58, was a transplant coordinator at a major hospital in the Houston Medical Center. He had used his position to act as a broker, connecting organs to wealthy, desperate patients. When arrested, Okafor's demeanor was calm, even clinical. "I was saving lives with organs that would otherwise go to waste," he claimed, as though justifying his actions to a room of stunned detectives. But when investigators confronted him with the charge of murder, he remained unflinching. "You murdered 6 women," they said. "That's a matter of perspective," Okafor replied coldly, his face betraying no emotion. The final arrest came in McAllen, a border town where a transport coordinator was caught smuggling harvested organs across the border to Mexican clinics. This operation, it seemed, had extended its reach far beyond the United States, serving wealthy international clients. This man, whose name was withheld during the operation, was responsible for moving the organs to patients in Mexico, the Philippines, and Singapore. He was arrested on charges of human trafficking and organized crime, adding another piece to the growing puzzle of this vast criminal network. The task force moved quickly, securing confessions from some of the key players. Their interrogations revealed much about the operation and the individuals who ran it. Tyler Boone broke quickly under questioning. It didn't take long for him to give up the entire operation. "It was just a job," he said, his voice flat. "I didn't kill anyone. I just brought them." When shown Rose's photo, Boone's face remained expressionless. "I don't remember faces. There were too many." His indifference was chilling. He had been a cog in the wheel, moving women from one place to the next without ever fully understanding the horror he was contributing to. Victor Ruiz was defiant from the moment he was arrested. He showed no remorse. His words cold and calculated. "They came here willingly. They made poor choices," Ruiz said. His lack of empathy was evident in every word. He had no guilt, no regret, only a twisted justification for his actions. A psychiatric evaluation later confirmed what the investigators had already suspected. Ruiz displayed signs of antisocial personality disorder. He didn't see people as victims, just as objects to be used for profit. Dar. Okafor in his interrogation was perhaps the most chilling of all. He justified his actions as a medical necessity, arguing that the organs he facilitated the sale of were saving lives. "Do you know how many people die waiting for organs?" "I saved 30 lives, Okafor said, his voice steady, like he was reciting a fact. Investigators pushed back. "You murdered 6 women." To this, Okafor only responded with a cold, unsettling reply. "That's a matter of perspective." The raids yielded an overwhelming amount of evidence, which painted a horrifying picture of the network's operations. Among the records seized were the details of 6 confirmed murders, with at least 12 more victims under investigation. The black market operation had generated $2.3 million in illicit payments traced back to patients in Mexico, the Philippines, and Singapore, all desperate to receive organs. Each piece of evidence added to the case, proving just how far-reaching this operation had been and how deeply it had been embedded in the global underground organ trade. The trial was the culmination of months of investigation, pain, and raw emotion. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Patricia Moreno, took the floor. Prosecutor Patricia Moreno presented a powerful, heartbreaking timeline of Rosa Velasco's final days. The courtroom fell silent as surveillance footage was shown depicting Rosa's arrival at Houston Hobby Airport. Her hopeful smile, her trust as she waited for the man she believed was her future. The footage was a stark contrast to the horror that would unfold. Moreno then played audio of Rosa's voice messages to Tommy. Messages filled with innocent hope. I can't wait to see you. The warmth of her voice echoed through the courtroom and the jurors' faces tightened with emotion. Autopsy photos were presented, images too graphic to be shown to the public, but enough to silence the room. The jury's reaction spoke volumes. Shock, disbelief, and the heavy weight of what had been done to this woman. Financial records were shown next, painting a chilling picture of the profit motive behind the operation. These weren't random killings. They were carefully orchestrated for financial gain. Beatrice spoke with a trembling voice as she described Rosa's loneliness and the love she had hoped to find. She shared the diary entries Rosa had written about her desire to love again. To feel valued after years of raising her children alone. But when Beatrice said, "They didn't just kill my sister. They killed her hope," her voice cracked and the courtroom went still. The tears were impossible to hide as the weight of her loss became palpable. Diego's testimony was gut-wrenching. He described the personal items his mother had packed for her trip. Items that were later found at the crime scene. As he spoke about telling his children, his mother's grandchildren, that Lola wasn't coming home, his voice broke with sorrow. Turning to the defendants, his words were direct and full of fury. "You saw my mother as merchandise. She was everything to us." His words hung heavy in the air, the full weight of his pain and anger bearing down on the defendants. FBI agent Cho took the stand next, explaining the scope of the human trafficking network that Rosa had become a part of. He outlined how the operation systematically targeted vulnerable women, luring them with promises of love, only to exploit their bodies for profit. He showed the spreadsheet that had been found on the seized laptop, a list where Rosa had been evaluated, rated, and selected like a piece of merchandise. The medical examiner took the stand to detail the cause of death, confirming that Rosa had been strangled. The examiner also explained that the organ removal had occurred post-mortem, but swiftly after her death, demonstrating a level of professional skill in the extraction. It was clear that Rosa had not been killed by chance. Her body had been harvested for profit. Tyler Boone's defense attorney attempted to shift blame, claiming that Boone had been manipulated by Victor Ruiz and didn't know the full scope of the operation. His lawyer argued that he wasn't involved in the killings. He was just the recruiter, someone who brought the victims to the killers. Victor Ruiz's lawyer tried to minimize the case, claiming that the evidence was circumstantial with no direct proof that Ruiz had performed any of the extractions. It was a weak argument attempting to discredit the overwhelming evidence against him. Dr. Kenneth Okafor's lawyer took a different tack, claiming that Okafor had provided medical services in good faith, unaware of the origins of the organs he brokered. He argued that Okafor had been trying to save lives, not take them. Assistant DA Patricia Moreno delivered a powerful closing argument, her voice steady and full of conviction. Rosa Velasco was 55 years old. She taught children to read for 30 years. She raised 3 kids alone after her husband died. She survived poverty, grief, and loneliness. She survived everything life threw at her until she met them. They saw her heart, her hope, her trust, and they turned it into profit. They made her pay for wanting love with her life. Let's make them pay for what they took. The courtroom held its breath as the judge began reading the verdicts one by one, the tension rising with each word. Tyler Boone guilty. Capital murder human trafficking sentence life without parole. Victor Ruiz guilty capital murder organ trafficking sentence death penalty. Dar Kenneth Okafor guilty conspiracy to commit murder organ trafficking. Sentence 35 years federal prison. As the verdicts were read, Rosa's family held each other weeping quietly. Beatrice whispered to herself. She knows. She knows we fought for her. The weight of the verdict settled into the hearts of those who had lost so much. But for the first time in months, there was a glimmer of justice. The criminals who had stolen Rosa's life had been held accountable. While the wounds of the past would never fully heal, the family could take solace in knowing that Rosa's death had not been in vain. Her story had been heard. Her hope, her love, and her fight for justice would never be forgotten. Rosa Velasco's body was returned to the Philippines, where she was buried beside her late husband in the serene town she had once called home. Her funeral was a somber affair. Attended by hundreds of former students who now stood as adults, some with children of their own, all coming to honor the woman who had shaped their lives with her care and dedication. Rosa's life as a teacher, mother, and sister had touched so many, and her absence was felt deeply in the community. Rosa's grandchildren, too young to fully grasp the gravity of what had happened, were left with a void. They would grow up without their Lola, without the warmth of the woman who had dreamed of seeing them thrive, and who had tried so desperately to find love once more. 4. Beatrice, the pain of losing her sister never truly faded. She saw Rosa in her dreams, always waiting outside that Texas apartment, just as Rosa had waited for Tommy with hope and trust in her heart. The haunting image of her sister, still in that final moment of uncertainty, pushed Beatrice to act. She couldn't bring Rosa back, but she could channel her grief into something that might save others. Beatrice started Rosa's Hope, a foundation dedicated to educating Filipinos about the dangers of online romance scams and human trafficking. I can't bring her back, Beatrice said. But I can stop another family from going through this. Her foundation became a beacon of awareness, helping to prevent the cycle of manipulation that had ensnared her sister. The ripple effects of Rosa's tragic death extended far beyond her family. Her case became a catalyst for change, sparking reforms across multiple sectors. The dating platform Rosa had used was forced to make significant changes. In response to public outcry and legal pressure, Filipinoarts.com and similar sites implemented mandatory ID verification for all users. A clear warning message was added to their terms of use, alerting members to the dangers of meeting strangers abroad. The site also partnered with Interpol to flag suspicious patterns and activities, creating an early warning system to protect users from exploitation. Rosa's case highlighted the critical need for better coordination between countries when it came to missing persons, especially in international contexts. In response, a fast-track protocol for missing persons cases was established between the U.S. and the Philippines, ensuring quicker responses when citizens went missing abroad. A shared database of suspected traffickers was created and consular alerts were issued for Filipinos traveling to meet online partners. The international community took notice, knowing that this wasn't just Rosa's story. It was a global issue. The medical industry, particularly organ transplant coordinators, faced new scrutiny. In the wake of the investigation, stricter oversight was introduced to ensure transparency in the transplant process. A new database was established to track the origins of organs, and harsher penalties were put in place for those involved in the black market trade. The hope was that such reforms would prevent future abuses within an industry that had been exploited for profit. Despite the arrests and convictions, the investigation into the network was far from over. 12 potential additional victims were still being investigated, their identities and fates unknown. Other members of the trafficking network remained at large, and international connections to organ markets were suspected to still be active. Authorities issued a stark warning. This wasn't the only operation. There were more hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Dr. Helen Rodriguez, a leading expert on human trafficking, provided insight into the larger implications of Rosa's case. Rosa's case exposed what many of us have been warning about for years. She said, organ trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar global industry. It preys on two kinds of desperation. The desperation of people who need organs to survive and the desperation of lonely people who just want to be loved. As long as both types of desperation exist, predators will exploit them. Her words were a grim reminder of the ongoing threat that existed and would continue to exist so long as vulnerable people were manipulated for profit. The industry, as Dr. Rodriguez pointed out, was far-reaching and complex, and the battle against it was far from over. Rosa's story is a cautionary tale, a painful reminder of how easily trust can be exploited. But her family's plea is one of hope. If you recognize these red flags, don't ignore them. Reach out for help. Protect your heart and protect your life. Rosa didn't have this warning, but you do. The tragedy of Rosa's death doesn't have to be your story. Let her family's wisdom be the shield you need to avoid falling into the same trap. Tonight, somewhere in the world, a woman in her 50s is messaging someone she met online. She's smiling at her phone. She's feeling seen, chosen, wanted for the first time in years. She's thinking about booking a flight. She's thinking about surprising him. And the person on the other end of that message, they're looking at her profile like a catalog. They're noting her blood type, her health history, her family situation. They're calculating her worth. Rosa Velasco is buried. Her killers are in prison, but the networks, they're still active. The website's still running. The lonely people still vulnerable. So, here's the question that should keep all of us awake. How many women right now are exactly where Rosa was 6 months before she died, falling in love with someone who's already decided she's worth more dead than alive? If you recognize yourself in Rosa's story, if you're talking to someone who's checking all these red flag boxes, please show this video to someone you trust. Let them help you see clearly. Your loneliness is real. Your desire for love is valid, but your life is more valuable than the risk. And if you know someone who's planning to meet an online partner for the first time, especially traveling internationally to surprise them, intervene. Be the voice that Rosa's family wishes they had been more forcefully. Be annoying. Be overprotective. Be the reason they stay alive. Rosa Velasco, elementary school teacher, mother of 3, grandmother of 5, sister, friend. She wasn't a cautionary tale. She was a woman who deserved to grow old, to hold her grandchildren, to find love on her own terms. She deserved the happy ending she was searching for. Instead, she got a storage unit in Houston and a headstone in Cebu. If this story affected you, if it made you think twice, if it might save someone you know, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel exists to tell the stories that need to be told, to warn about the dangers that hide behind promises. Share this video. I mean it. Share it with every woman you know who's active on dating sites. Share it in your family group chats. Make it awkward. Make people uncomfortable. Rosa's family would give anything to have made her uncomfortable enough to stay home. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you've ever encountered a situation like this online, your story might help someone else recognize the signs. And if you want to support the work we do here, bringing these cases to light, consider joining our channel membership. You'll get early access to episodes, exclusive content, and behind-the-scenes looks at how we research these stories. But more importantly, you'll be helping us continue doing this work. Rosa Velasco's story doesn't end with her death. It ends with what we do with the warning she left behind. Don't let her death be meaningless. Use it. Learn from it. Let it save you or someone you love. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. Stay skeptical. And remember, if something feels too good to be true, it's worth taking the time to find out why. I'll see you in the next